Hello, Frizzle fellas. I have read 10 books. Well, I've read more than 10 books in my life, but I've read 10 books recently that I haven't yet reviewed on this channel, and that's what we're doing today. And our game today is a tournament bracket. As we go through this bracket, I will be reviewing the losers, meaning that we will slowly be working through all of these books from the less good ones up to my favorite book last. So our first matchup from the bottom left of this bracket is Midnight Sun versus two books in the Hybrid Helix series, Wistful Ascending and Return of the Griffin. And this is difficult because if we're comparing Midnight Sun to the first book of these two, I liked Wistful Ascending better. But if we are comparing Midnight Sun to this sequel, I would choose Midnight Sun. So which one did I like better overall? The winning slot is going to get to go to the two books of the Hybrid Helix series, which means that I get to review first Midnight Sun. So Midnight Sun is a book from the Twilight series, and it is a somewhat recently published novel. Here is the catch with it. It is not from the protagonist Bella's perspective, it's from her love interest, the vampire Edward. And this book, it does some wacky, wild things. It goes places, and the reason is, it doesn't hold back from Edward being a creepy stalker predator, which he always has been in the Twilight books, but in the books from Bella's perspective, it's more romanticized, and in this book, it doesn't romanticize it as much. It's straight up like, yeah, Edward is spying on her, Edward is stalking her, Edward wants to eat her, and it's really funny and clever, and I thoroughly enjoyed a lot of parts of this book for that reason. But this book also has its issues, and its issues basically boil down to it's way too long. This book is taking an already pretty bloated and long plot from Twilight and copying like every single one of those scenes, and then adding also more scenes, and it's just like you get hundreds of pages of just Edward obsessing over Bella, and there isn't much like stakes or plot to it or even character development. And though it was very entertaining at first, after a while it just got annoying. If this book was more like 500 pages instead of like 800 pages, I think it could have been honestly a masterpiece, but it's severely bloated. I have a video where I chose authors that I've given both a 1 star to and 5 stars to in the past and read another one of their books, and this was part of that project, and I'll link that video down in the footnotes for you. In the end, I gave Midnight Sun 3 stars. The next of our matchups is Part-Time Gods and the next book in that series, which is called Night Shift Dragons versus Mysteries of Thorn Manor. And between the two of these, I definitely liked Part-Time Gods better, so we are going to talk first about Mysteries of Thorn Manor. Mysteries of Thorn Manor is a sequel novella to the book Sorcery of Thorns that I read a few months ago, and it is a very cute, kind of cozy YA adventure book about a girl who was orphaned and raised in a magical library. And this library houses like these monstrous grimoires that literally will eat you. And then in book 1, she gets accused of murder and gets wrapped up in all of these warlock politics and ends up saving the world, and also finding love with this boy. And then here in our sequel, Mystery of Thorn Manor, it is them now living together in the manor. And this novella is very cute, it's very low stakes, it's very much focused on the couple and the romance, and I just had a lot of fun reading it. I would say if you liked the first book, Sorcery of Thorns, definitely check this one out, but if you haven't read that one, I'm not sure it completely stands up on its own. I rated Mysteries of Thorn Manor 3 stars. And our next matchup is House in the Cerulean Sea versus Wistful Ascending and its sequel. And another hard one because House in the Cerulean Sea beats the sequel, but the first book beats House in the Cerulean Sea. Wistful Ascending still takes the cake, even with its bad sequel dragging it down. And yes, I'm very excited to talk about both those books, but first we're going to talk about House in the Cerulean Sea. The House in the Cerulean Sea is a very feel-good book, and it was very cute at the beginning and then got boring because there wasn't anything more to its cuteness after a while. Our main character, Linus, is a caseworker that investigates magical orphanages. And he works for a pretty evil and corrupt organization. And then he gets sent to a very special orphanage where all the very most powerful and unusual magical kids kids get sent to. And while he's there, he learns to really get to know the kids and starts caring for them and realizes that he's working for an evil corporation and maybe he should quit that, and also falls in love with the master of the orphanage. So all of the magical children were adorable. And it was also a lot of fun to root for Linus as he learns the importance of friendship and fun and not just following orders from evil corporations. But this book didn't know how to handle its stakes. Like, I didn't think that the romance was particularly believable, and also, like, the big confrontations with the corporation at the end, like, fizzled in pacing and, like, were really confusing and weird. So in the end, 3 stars, I liked it, but meh. It was kind of underwhelming. I think this is a book more that people go in for the very cozy vibes, and it does have that in spades, but I think I want a little bit more plot and excitement in my books, you know? And our next matchup is the 2 books from the DFZ series versus the 2 books from the Hybrid Helix series, and this is an easy slam dunk win for Part-Time Gods and Night Shift Dragons. So finally, I get to talk about all the things that bothered me and the things that I loved about the Wistful Ascending and its sequel, Return of the Griffin. So Wistful Ascending names its genre as like a superhero space opera fantasy, which, yes, it is all of those genres, and it definitely balances them really well. Our main character is Rohan, who started life kind of as a superhero on Earth, and then journeyed out into the galaxy and got tangled up with this like really powerful and evil empire, and then worked kind of as a super villain for them for many years. And then he's finally gotten out of that life, and he is so done with all of that gladiator fighting and being a berserker. So now he's settled down on this space station in the middle of nowhere where he tows spaceships by hand, by flying around in space. And then various trouble comes looking for him. And of course he has to get involved because no one else can handle it, and there comes the adventure and him having to kind of confront his past that he left behind. So book 1 was great, and I was so excited to start book 2, and then book 2 has a fairly different plot because Earth is being attacked by these giant shark demons that are killing like millions of people, and they need some superheroes to sort it out. So our Rohan goes back to Earth to try to sort this out, and I quickly lost patience or love for this book because so much of the plot becomes about angry United States racial politics. And like, I get enough of that in real life. I do not need it in my superhero space opera fantasy books. Additionally, the plot of this book also becomes much messier, less entertaining, and very concerned with like building up the lore of this world. Like, now we have like vampires and all these people with different abilities. And I feel like book 1 didn't give it enough scaffolding to support all of this extended universe. It's like suddenly Earth is like the DC Marvel very conglomeration of all of these different things. But I think one of the things that book 1 really excelled at was how kind of simple the world building ended up being in the end, and how focused the plot was on Rohan's journey of coming back into a hero role. And then in book 2 now, he doesn't really have a journey to go on, and also it's just all of this messy world building getting thrown at you along with being angry about racism. And next matchup we have Pines versus The Flash Hocus Pocus. 2 books that I didn't like, and I dislike The Flash Hocus Pocus even more. So that's the one we get to talk about first. So this book takes place in the world of the CW Flash TV show from 2014. It was part of my video of authors that I've given 1 star and 5 stars to before, and then reading another one of his books. The book was just so boring, and everything kind of feels stale and without a lot of passion in it, and that definitely describes what this book feels like. And on top of the super boring plot and the lackluster characters and like the lack of stakes or tension and like ridiculously cheesy dialogue, like more than all of that, the thing that I hated most was the terrible techno babble in this book. In the end, I gave The Flash Hocus Pocus 1 star. Next we have Revenant Prince versus The Death of the Necromancer. And this one is easy. I liked Revenant Prince better. So first we get to talk about The Death of the Necromancer. The Death of the Necromancer is a standalone novel taking place in kind of an interconnected world, the books of 𝐿𝐴𝐼𝐹. In this book, we are following a group of very clever thieves, and their whole goal is not to make money, but to ruin the life of a particular politician who unfairly sentenced our protagonist's father to death. But they like to make money on the side because it helps fuel the revenge more. And then while they are trying to rob this tricky vault, they run into some other thieves that have like these magical zombies on their sides, and they're like, ooh, that doesn't quite check out. And then they quickly stumble into a plot, and they decide for the greater good that they should probably help solve this problem a little bit. One of my favorite parts of this book is the relationship that this thief gang has with the constabulary. There is a very much Sherlock and Watson duo on the police force, and both the gang and our Sherlock and Watson have great respect for each other and don't really want to take the other one down. And so over the course of this book, they end up kind of accidentally helping each other here and there, and it is very entertaining. And this book was certainly fun, but didn't quite knock my socks off. Inter-character relationships were particularly lackluster. This book, the bones of it, the plot, has so much promise. And with just some extra juicy romance, with some extra juicy feelings on the page, it could really be an excellent novel. I gave The Death of the Necromancer 3 stars. Our next matchup is Swordheart versus Pines, and this very easily goes to Swordheart. So, Pines is a weird book. It starts out with a guy with, like, total amnesia, and he wakes up in this town that's really creepy, stumbles around for a while, and then ends up back at the hospital, where he suddenly remembers that he is a federal agent here to investigate the missing disappearance of a different agent. And then he got in, like, a car crash, and someone else died, and he's a little unsure what's happening. And then we cut to, like, his wife on the outside of this mysterious town, and she's like, oh, my husband, he's been gone for an entire year, disappeared suddenly. And then we cut back to him and he's discovering how creepy the town is. And then things start to unravel in like a horror kind of flavor. And I thought this book would be exciting, but nope, it's very boring. It's just that the protagonist is very confused and then the protagonist is very angry. And that's like the whole book is like this feeling of anger and injustice and how dare this town be so creepy and evil. And like, what a flop, because I had several people specifically tell me that I would like this book, and then, no, this book is far too angry for me. I gave Pines 2 stars. Next we have Revenant Prince versus Swordheart, and the champion title very easily goes to Revenant Prince. So now let's talk about Swordheart. Our protagonist, a middle-aged widowed woman, has recently come in to a lot of money in an inheritance from like her great uncle. But all of her other relatives don't think she deserves this inheritance and they are trying to steal it from her, and they end up locking her in her room and not letting her out for days. And she decides that the best solution to her problem is to try to kill herself, because then the inheritance will go to her next of kin, which aren't any of her terrible relatives. She's not the best at problem solving, but she has this old decorative sword hanging up in her room and she tries to use that. But as soon as she unsheaths the sword, she releases like a Celtic warrior genie kind of situation where his job is to defend the wielder of the sword, which is now her. So he helps her get out of the house and then they go on a quest to try to find a lawyer to help her with the sticky inheritance situation. And then they get to fall in love along the way. And like many other of the books on this bracket, for example, House in the Cerulean Sea and Mysteries of Thorn Manor, this book was very cute, but lacking in stakes for my taste. Like when I told you that the plot of this book was pretty much going out to find a lawyer and then bringing the lawyer back and like solving the legal difficulties, yeah, that's pretty much all of the plot. And like, yeah, there's a few hiccups along the way, like they get robbed by bandits on the road, like 4 times or whatever, but mostly it's them just puttering along thinking, the other character, they could never love me. Did I ship it? Yes, I did. But was I also kind of bored? Yes. I think another thing that really tripped up this book for me is that it's part of an interconnected universe, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but I did feel like there were quite a few pages dedicated to just like, remember what happened in that previous book? No, it's not currently relevant to anything that's happening now. I just wanted to remind you of the entire plot of that book. You know? And it didn't make me like excited to read the other books, it just made me annoyed that it was taking up so much page time in this book to try to like set up this interconnected universe. I gave Swordheart 3 stars. Next, the final bracket! Part-Time Gods versus Revenant Prince. And this is hard. I gave both of these books 5 stars. I think the winner gets to go to Part-Time Gods. Oh, you know what I just realized? The top two that I both gave 5 stars are also both self-published books. So we are having a very good month for indie authors here on 𝐂𝐿e Frizzle channel. Revenant Prince is the second book in a series. In the first book, here's the basic plot. We have a character named 𝐼𝐻𝐻𝐒, and he is an immortal. Every time he dies, he will wake up just fine the next day, but here's the catch, he doesn't have any of his memories. So from other people's perspectives, he's an immortal who has lived for thousands of years, and from his perspective, he's just an amnesiac. So he's kind of like not a fan of this amnesiac life, so he's on a quest to try to reverse this. He's on a quest to unimmortalize himself. And then in our other group of narrators, we've got people who are with him on his quest, helping him, and a villain actively trying to stop it and capture him for their own very relatable and fun reasons. And I think that's the character that shined most for me in book 2. It's that villain. The reason that she's hunting down our immortal character is that she wants the secret of immortality for her brother who is dying, and she's very driven to do this. And then at the end of book 1, due to the fantastic actions of the heroes, she's suffering some severe setbacks. And then book 2 is her kind of exploring that and really grappling with her very real losses that she's faced. So I loved Revenant Prince. I thought it was exciting and had good mysteries and very good character development for all of our narrators. I would highly recommend this series, and I'm very excited to see where book 3 goes. I gave Revenant Prince 5 stars. And then we finally get to talk about the winner of the bracket, Part-Time Gods. So Part-Time Gods is the second book of the DFZ series. And this is a series about Opal. And she lives in a very magical cyberpunk city named the DFZ. And her job is that she cleans out properties that people have vacated due to not being able to pay the rent. Not a very exciting job until you remember that this is Magic City, and sometimes these apartments are not quite normal. And at the beginning of book 1, she's cleaning out this apartment of this very powerful mage and gets caught up in his work that he left behind, which quickly spirals and gets her on the bad side of the magical mob and the dragons. And one of my favorite things about this series is it's not just her that's in this trouble. She acquires a business partner named Nick, who is like a cyborg ninja man, and he's very much like the stoic tough guy type, and it's so endearing to see their bond over the course of the series develop and him slowly come out of his shell. Like honestly, some of the romance and declarations of love in these books are like the best I've ever read, and I adore them. It's got a fast-paced plot, great character development, a fascinating world to explore, and the cherry on top of it all, a very cute romance. I gave Part-Time Gods 5 stars. The 2 other books in the trilogy I gave 4 stars, but it was a very high 4 stars. I did love them all. And those are the last 10 books I read. One of them, The House in the Cerulean Sea, was for the book club that I run on Discord. It is $2 a month to join, and this is the book that we are reading next. Thank you for watching.